Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the V Spot. I'm super excited for today's special guest. Tamara Kellam-Washington is the founder and lead trainer of Dynamic Insights. She's a certified emotional intelligence coach and a behavior change specialist, as well as the host of the Bend Without Breaking podcast. Tamara, thank you for joining me in the V Spot today.
Having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, welcome. I'm always excited to share space with you. And I always like to begin by thanking my guests for accepting an invitation to a podcast where they have no clue what questions will be asked. So I want to just highlight your courage, your vulnerability in this moment, and welcome you to the space. So
Thank
thanks
you.
again.
I think it speaks to the whole bend without breaking concept, right? being able to bend with the wind, being able to flow with whatever is in front of you and adapt in that way. So
yeah, absolutely. And I'm really looking forward to you sharing more about, the podcast with us. There's so many good things, to discuss with you. So I wanted to jump right in and shine the light on emotional intelligence. So I personally love emotional intelligence. I spent the first 14 years of my career assessing intellectual intelligence, right? And I was always pulled towards emotional intelligence because I felt it was, to be quite frank, more important. I really enjoyed the aspect of it more important. So talk to us about what it means to be an emotional intelligence coach.
yeah, so I was recently certified in emotional intelligence, and I work with a scientifically validated instrument called the EQI. And this instrument has been used for at least 20 years, maybe more. And what it does is it can quantify a person's level of emotional intelligence. So I took this course because I was always like you, I was always drawn to emotional intelligence. And but what I learned was, and what was fascinating to me about this specific instrument was, number one, everyone has. So number one, emotional intelligence is comprised of a number of skills that can be learned and developed. So that's number one. Number two, everyone has skills where they're very strong, and everyone has skills that are less developed, and that's across the board. So I think sometimes there are some myths that someone is either emotionally intelligent or they're not, but the reality is that everyone has unique strengths and unique weaknesses. And the third thing that really stood out to me, and what the instrument points out, is it's not so much looking at discrete scores like, oh, you're high in empathy or you're high in assertiveness. Looking at scores in isolation doesn't tell you a person's story, but looking at the patterns of scores and where there are out of balance skills, that's what tells you all about a person. And I can look at a person's scores now and create a hypothesis that says, well, I can tell that you have trouble with conflict just because of the way that these scores are relating to one another. And so that's what I'm really enjoying about learning and really delving into this specific instrument as it relates to emotional intelligence, because now I can really work with people to bring their skills, kind of bring the underdeveloped skills into balance with those highly developed skills. And I think what's important to highlight about that, and this is my approach as a coach, is that my approach is very strengths-based. It's not deficits-based. So we're never looking at someone's weaknesses and saying, you need to stop doing this. We all know from a behavioral perspective that you don't necessarily stop a behavior or a habit. What you do is you understand how that habit or behavior developed, but then you adopt new behaviors. You adopt, you develop new habits. So it's the same with emotional intelligence, where we're saying we don't ever want to tell someone, well, your assertiveness skill is higher than your empathy, so let's bring your assertiveness down. No, that assertiveness is serving you, right? It's well developed for a reason. So we want to add tools to the toolbox. We don't want to take anything away. So then how can we bring that empathy up? And so that's really what I'm enjoying about using this specific instrument.
I love that. And I love how you highlight that it's a skill set that can be developed, right? Because I think that so often when we hear, and at least I'll speak for myself, so often when I hear people speaking of emotional intelligence, it's very much in the context of they are emotionally intelligent or they're not, right? And there's not this conversation around developing these skills that aren't as, you know, heightened as some others, right? And I think that's great. So is when you work with someone, or and in a minute I know we'll go into an like organizational change, because I know that that's a focus of dynamic insights. Is is there tangible suggestions in terms of improving this particular skill, and what and how that shows up for people?
Yeah, so it all depends on the skill. For example, I'm working on a training now for a university, and one of it depends on the context as well. So because I'm going to be training leaders, my mentor and I were kind of going over what are some of the key leadership skills that are important. One that doesn't get enough attention is emotional self-awareness,
Mm,
right?
yeah,
That's like the foundation. I think that's the foundational EQ skill, right? If we're talking
yeah.
about emotional intelligence, it's first having an awareness of what you're feeling, where the feelings are coming from, being able to distinguish between emotions and thoughts, understanding how your emotions are influencing your thoughts and your behaviors, understanding how your emotions are influencing others. So that is
Mm,
huge, right? So we look at something like emotional self-awareness, then it's kind of going into, some of it is touching on those cognitive behavioral concepts, right? Where like being able to distinguish, that's like one of the fundamental skills you learn in using any cognitive behavioral coaching or therapeutic intervention, right? Um, but it all depends on the context and the specific skill. There are going to be very tangible tools, things that you can apply right away to improving the skills, but it depends on which skill we're working on and in the context of, in which that skill is being used. With this instrument, there are 5 composite skills. There's self-perception, self-expression, interpersonal, decision making, and stress management. And under each
mm.
of those, there are 3 sub skills. And so what we do is we
Oh,
look at
wow.
the sub skills and we work on whichever sub skills are in need of development.
Oh, wow. So yeah, it breaks down very specifically. I am familiar more with the Goldman, the 5 different aspects, right? And so when I think about emotional intelligence and think about self-awareness and self-regulation, empathy, it's hard to differentiate between which is the most significant, right? Because they all really complement each other and interlock. Um, so I love that there's a breakdown to go even deeper in terms of what it looks like and how to, support.
Yeah,
That's
and Goldman's
powerful.
model is great, and there's a lot of overlap between the two. I like the model that I'm using was developed by Reuven Bar-On, and his how he has it, he just operationalizes it a little differently. And I like the way that it is grouped together, all the skills, because it really, it makes a lot of sense. It's very clear, it's very easy to understand how they're different, but also how they are all interrelated.
Yeah, totally. All right, great. I'm super excited to hear more about the work. So, when we first met, you were leading your My Body, My Vision coaching programs. Can you share
Yeah.
a bit about your personal journey and how it paved the way for you to step into the work that you were doing and sort of where you're moving to now?
Yeah. My journey has been one of uh, perpetual personal transformation um, in all areas of my life. I think, just having a very tumultuous childhood, being heavily influenced by my exposure to trauma and abuse so young, um, and how that negatively impacted me, right? With mental health issues, struggles with obesity, um, severe depression, severe mood disorders. Like, now I know I don't use mental health labels, but I understand nervous system dysregulation, right?
Yeah.
And that being a function of, or a response to, being in a highly unstable and dangerous environment, right? So when I embarked on my journey to lose weight, it wasn't about losing weight. It was about becoming the woman that I wanted to be. And the weight loss was more of a side effect, right? It was, it was an output, not really something that I was working on specifically. I just wanted to be healthier. I wanted to be happier. But what's so great is that when we're talking about weight loss, you can't talk about it without talking about things like emotional intelligence, without talking about healing, right? Which I prefer the term integration now. We can't talk about, any type of transformation without doing some type of internal work. So when I launched My Body, My Vision, I was trying to move away from this very transactional relationship that we have to health and fitness, where it's, eat this many calories, work out this many days a week, in order to reach your goal weight. I felt that was treating the symptom. And so I started really, I realized, even just reflecting on my own journey, that there was a lot of internal work that took place. And so, my coaching with My Body, My Vision was really centered around that internal work that people were wanting to skip over because they just wanted the results for whatever reason, right? But as I continue to coach people, I think as I continue to evolve in my own journey, my coaching practice evolved, and I started looking at change in the context of community rather than on the individual level, which in our culture we highlight self-reflection and self-work. But what I learned, and what I've been learning through my education, just going back to school and studying social psychology, is that we don't develop in isolation. Everything is sociocultural. Everything's happening in the context of our relationships, our communities, our societies. And then just reflecting on some of my experiences within organizations, I realized that I had a lot of knowledge that I could generalize and apply to organizations, and maybe reach people on a broader scale. And the work seems different, but it's not, because when we're talking about organizational change, or conflict management in organizations, or whatever we're talking about well-being still. It's still a well-being
1,000%.
conversation. It's still a health and wellness conversation. And that's what I love about it. And I still get to work with people and do that inner work to support well-being, but now it's just the context has changed just a little bit.
Yeah, I love that, because I'm super committed to, my work being in the workplace as well, my mental health, vulnerability, right? Like, because I think there's an expectation that when we get to work, you sort of hit the switch and now you go into a robotic productive mode, which is not how it works, right? So I love that it's very much about shining the light on the changes and the developments within the community of work, where many people spend several hours per day, and the collective growth that occurs as a result of that process, as well as the individual growth. So I think that that's so profound. And something that you said, I want to go back to, just to highlight for everybody who's listening, this aspect of your journey and your work and your coaching, and how it was super important for you to really go deeper than the effect, right? Than just the result. And how many people at points want to bypass the journey, right? And just experience the results. But I love how you created a program, which I still have my notes on, and I'm really able to tune into a lot of the strategies and tips that you provided back then that go way deeper than the surface, right? And I think that's so profound to highlight about the work that you do, because I know that with My Body, My Vision, you created that. And so I'm certain that with dynamic insights and being in the workplace, it's going way deeper than the surface, so I love
Yeah,
that.
for sure.
Yeah, that's profound work. And so your work evolves, as do you, right, over the years. And so here you are, now focusing on organizational change, and what would you say that you're enjoying most about your current work?
I love that I get to be creative. And so developing trainings, that's something I love and I could spend all day doing. um, and but I think what I really love is group work. I love looking at, growth and development and change in the context of community. And every training that I create now, I try to include some type of cooperative learning strategy. So, how can what learning goal can I give back to the group and they own that goal and work together in achieving that outcome or that objective, rather than the traditional style of, the way we're taught to learn, which we're not learning, right?
Yeah.
We're taught to memorize information. We're taught to get the right answer. We're taught that there is only one right answer and only one way to get there. And none of that prepares us for the adaptive, crazy, out of the blue challenges that we're dealing with every
Yeah.
day in real life,
Exactly.
where there's never one answer. There's never one way to get somewhere. There's never,
Yeah.
it's not about what you can remember or memorize, right? It's about your ability to generate the solution, or not recall what the right answer is. And I remember talking to a friend of mine about this. I said, sometimes if I'm stressed out and I'm like praying to whoever's listening, please, can you give me the answer? And I joked around. I said, God's looking back like that's for you to figure out. I don't have the answer,
Mm,
like
yeah.
you're on the leading edge. This is what it looks like. You actually get to create the answer. And that's what,
Mm,
and when I had that realization, I felt a huge weight lifting off of me, because for so many years I was frustrated with myself because I had these challenges and I thought something must be wrong with me because I don't know the answer. And I'm trying to find the right answer to solve this problem and I couldn't. And I'm like, no, Tamara, it's not that there's no looking for the right answer. It's creating the answer for you, right?
mm,
And so once I started to realize that that's what it's all about, I realized we're not taught to learn in a way that supports the day-to-day challenges that we have, living this life. So when I think about how can I change the way we learn or offer groups of people new ways of learning that really capitalizes on their wisdom and their creativity, right? So instead of me
mm,
being in front of the room with my arms crossed, like, okay, so who has the right answer? No, it's come on, y'all, work together and you give me the answer. So then it
yeah.
becomes this, reciprocal relationship where I have things that I can teach you, but all along the way I'm learning too. And that's what I love about it.
I love that. I love that. And I just want to really like echo what you said, to folks who are listening. It's about creating the answer for you, right? As opposed to looking for the answer. I think that's a significant distinction, because it really lends to the fact that we have everything it takes, to create, right? What's best for us, what works for us, what's the solution, as opposed to waiting and searching. I love that. That's exceptionally powerful. So create your answer, your solution. That's huge.
And that was the premise of My Body, My Vision too. It was, let's move away from what's the right diet or the right workout plan, or like, why don't we start with your vision and work backwards from there, right? Rather
Yeah,
than trying to
yeah.
find what's the right body. I saw this meme the other day. It had 4 different women, 4 different body types, ranging from tiny and slim to, plus size. And highlighting how each of those women get shamed in some way, shape, or form.
Mm.
And it reminded me of this Aesop's fable where, so that this there was an old man, his son, an adult male, and then the grandson, and a donkey. And so at first they said the old man should be on the donkey because he's older. But as they're walking through town, the villagers started cursing at them. You have this child walking, the child should be on the donkey. This isn't right. This is child abuse. So they take the old man off the donkey, they put the child on the donkey. And as they're walking through and they go to another village, and the villagers there are admonishing them, oh, you have this old man walking, that's not fair. This child, he's young, he's vital, he should be walking. So they take the old man off. And so now none of them are on the donkey. And they're walking through town, and then these villagers call out and go, these idiots, why isn't anyone using it? And so it just speaks to the fact that it's all relative, right? It's all
Yeah.
like, you're not going to
Yeah.
please everybody. Someone's going to have an opinion about something. Someone would have done it differently for whatever reason. And, we all just get to mind our business and do whatever
Yeah.
we need to do,
Right.
whatever's going to work for us,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's a powerful story to share now, because I think that, we are in need of focusing in on what's best, right, for us. What is the way to travel, which healing journey, which route, which career, which whatever, right? Everything is personal in that sense. But we are very much in a time where it's easy to look out and it should be this way, it should be that way. Why is this one doing this? Why is that one doing that? It's really powerful to, you damned if you do, damned if you don't, if you're looking for the outside validation or whatever, approval, and shift to what is it for you.
Yeah, and that need to look at what others are doing, that's a function of our own insecurities, right?
Yeah.
People who are really whole and happy with themselves, and they're not scrutinizing other people, not to the degree that you see happening here today.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because I think what happens is you get so busy working on you, right? Like you are so immersed in your own development and your own, all of it, the journey, that the focus isn't there to talk about how you should have, shouldn't have, and
Yeah.
it's really about like staying the course. Yeah. Busy with my own work. That is for sure. Well, Tamara, I often speak about courage over comfort in my work. And so talk to us about what courage over comfort looks like in your life right now.
Courage over comfort looked like walking away from a six-figure salary in a multinational, financial services company that afforded me, the best medical benefits, the best dental benefits, the ability to travel first class, overseas for work-related functions or initiatives, and just saying, I'm comfortable in these ways, right, materially, but I was uncomfortable, right? There was a trade-off there. I was uncomfortable because I was not able to utilize my strengths and my gifts and my talents. So courage over comfort was saying, forget the fact that I'm in my late 30s, forget whatever shame I have around trying to go back to school now and get my degree. Forget what people put on degrees, right? Forget all of that. Like, it's courageous to say, I have my lived experience, I have my integrity, I have my commitment to learning and growing, I have my commitment to always striving to be as credible as I can possibly be, right? And walk away from what's familiar and comfortable and what feels safe, and to really lean into what is it that I truly, not that I want to do, but how am I meant to serve? And I've been thinking a lot about that lately. Um, there's all this emphasis on, what makes you special, or what makes you unique, or what's different about you, right? This is a common question people ask, especially when you're competing for a job or some kind of role or something. And people ask, well, why should we hire you, or what's different about you? And I think a lot of the anxiety that we have, especially in our society, is people are looking around and feeling like they're average, and like that's not okay. Like, I'm supposed to be special. I'm supposed to be different. There's something, I'm supposed to stand out in some way. And I thought about that yesterday. I was like, if someone were to ask me that today, what's different about you, or what makes you special? I would say what's different about me maybe is that I don't think about being special. I think about the impact that I want to have. I think about how I want to serve. I think about what I want to give, or how can I leave this space in better condition than when I found it, right? And so I say all that to say, when you're thinking about it from that perspective, then courage becomes easier, because there's a trust there that if I'm leaning in the direction of my gifts and how those gifts can be used to serve others, it's gonna be okay. I'm gonna be taken care of. I may have to make some sacrifices. I don't have my monthly spa days or whatever it was that I was sacrificed, right?
Yeah.
Third world, first world problem. But I say all that to say, there's going to be some discomfort anyway, right? You can stay comfortable, but we all know that oftentimes what's comfortable, we're calling comfortable, is uncomfortable, but we're conflating comfort with familiarity. So because it's what I know, it's because it's what I'm used to, it's comfortable. But if you really step back and look at it, you're like, no, this is actually not comfortable.
Yeah, it's actually no, totally. I 1,000% agree with that. And it's totally uncomfortable to stay someplace where it doesn't necessarily fit. It doesn't work, right? It doesn't align. It's not part of the vision. But two things that you say, well, first and foremost, as someone who can relate, right, to the letting go of the 6-figure salary, stable career with all of its bells and whistles, to pursue a vision that no one else sees, right? Except that I only have access to it. And so hearing you share about it in the way that you did, I want to celebrate you, because I think that, as someone who's on a similar journey, there's so much courage involved in that particular, venture. And to do it with an ease, and to do it with a grace in the way that you have, to stand for the contribution that you're committed to, I think is just so powerful. And in this moment, I want to shine the light on the fact that when you speak of answering the question, what makes you special? And you've been thinking of it through the lens of, how will I leave the world better, right? How can I be of greater service? It's so powerful to spotlight that is really about you, the output, versus, well, what makes me, and listen to anybody listening, not to, it's no shade on, how are you different? How are you special? And if you're in that conversation, that's where you are. But I think it's so significant to really spotlight that your answer to a question and your journey in sort of thinking about it is really about giving out, and that's powerful.
Yeah, because I think a lot of us are depressed or sad or discouraged about who we are, because we're sitting here and thinking, and especially with social media, where we have this, your value can be quantified now. Your thoughts are now have a quantified value. Only 3 people liked your joke versus the fact that 3,000 people like this person's joke, right? And so there's like, we're making these comparisons, and part of it is culturally, we have this need to, so humans fundamentally across the board, we have two needs. They're seemingly conflicting, but they're actually on a continuum. We have a need to belong, but we also have a need for differentiation. We do, and it's that balance of, there is that natural feeling of, okay, what makes me special, which is okay.
Yeah.
I think some of us we're always on that side of the equation of what makes me different. I need to stand out. And if you add to that this whole, attention economy that we're in, and how, and who's looking at me, and how many likes, and all of that, and it can really take you off course. It can really, have you externalizing your value, right? Your self-esteem, you're like leasing it, right? So on a day where people are giving you a compliment and telling you how wonderful you are, you're feeling good about yourself. And on those days, maybe when you're not getting that kind of feedback, you may be questioning yourself. And so there is something to really think about, like, because I thought about this. I when I turned 35, I realized, like, wow, everything that I am, or everything that I've strived to be, has been in response to what others have told me I am, or told me I wasn't.
Wow.
And I thought, I have no sense of self. And I think a lot of us we don't know that that's where we are. I had a sociology teacher say, stand in the middle of a public place and just watch and don't interact with anyone for 10 minutes. And then those 10 minutes, I felt, there was a part of me that was like, I felt, and I think a lot of us feel this existential loneliness in that, standing there without the feedback. And that is when I realized so much of who we are has to do with, we always talk about the individual, and we have this cognitive perspective and how, but no, there's so much about who we are that has to do with our relationship to other people. Yeah. I want to highlight, like I said, I talked about courage over comfort, and I talked about my own willingness, but I want to say that I would be wrong if I didn't mention the support that I have from my husband, right? Or the support that I have from my friends who are like, oh, Tamara, I've heard of this opportunity. The support that I have. So when we talk about courage, I think a lot of us, because of how we are taught in this society to value the individual, the hero. But the reality is that there's so many of us who are achieving great things, all of us, whatever it be. And I say great, and I don't mean, I'm not, whatever's great for you, no one is doing it alone. And so for people who are kind of struggling with fear, or like what they feel is maybe a lack of courage, sometimes it really is all about who's in your community, who's encouraging you. And I think that's the biggest piece for a lot of us. What's missing is not a lack of willingness or effort. For a lot of us, what's lacking is relationships that are supportive in a way, right? Whatever support looks like for us. So I'm getting into the practice of always bringing things back to community relationships, because it's something that we keep skipping over and focusing on the individual. But I'd be remiss to just look over that and not talk about how much my friends and family have supported me and continue to support me even to this day, whether they send me money if I'm feeling short, if I'm short on something, or whatever it is. I am supported by an amazing group of people. So it's not just about my own willingness to be courageous. It's that coupled with the support.
Yeah, I love that. I have the goosebumps because as I'm listening to you and looking at you, I'm envisioning like the tribe right behind you, right? And so oftentimes we see the person and we don't know the village that is behind them to turn the things out. And so there could be this dangerous comparison, right? Of like, how can I do that? Because
Yeah.
you're not seeing the big picture, right? It's the highlight reel. And you spoke about what I heard as the dangerous metrics that we use to assess our value, assess our worth. How good enough are we? Well, let's look to these on an unconscious level, right? These metrics that tell us,
Yeah.
and what happens when all of that's stripped away. And I think there is this very dangerous comparison theory, like what's the word that I'm looking for? I don't know, in this moment, like this way of being up against people where you're not able to actually see what are you really up against. Because if you were able to see the village behind you, your husband, your family, it would be a very different, like, oh, I'm not even going to compare me to an entire squad, right? And so I love that you highlight that, because we represent our lives, but we're not in it alone, and it's always better together, so I love that you're bringing it there.
And if you are in it alone, you know, how do you get to be different? Like what gets to be different for you? Um, you know, how can you show up differently for yourself so that you're in a space where you're drawing to you people who care about you genuinely.
Yeah.
And because some people are, whether it's perceptual or not, that feeling of being alone, I totally understand. I can relate to it.
Yeah.
But if you really think about it, a lot of times it's either a function of the relationship you have with yourself, right? Or it's that familiarity. It's maybe entertaining what you've outgrown, right? Who you've outgrown, yeah. Because it's familiar, and we're confusing familiarity with comfortability.
That part. Yeah, I love that. Absolutely. And to anybody who's listening who feels alone, makes me think about the quote, like friends are the family we choose. And so there's a call to action to choose people, right, who will support who you are, where you're looking to go, and keep those people close, right? Keep those people absolutely close. All right, great. So Tamara, talk to us about your new podcast, Bend Without Breaking.
So that concept came to me kind of touching on what we discussed a few minutes ago, and thinking about how we're taught to live and learn, in this very linear way. Here are the steps here's this very linear path to success. Here's this very linear path to adulthood. Everything's in a straight line. There are specific milestones you're supposed to hit at specific times. There are only specific right answers. You don't deviate from the path. And here we are now as a collective dealing with unprecedented challenges. Things that we could not prepare for because we had no idea that these problems were even possible, right? And we've all, at the individual, familial, relationship, community, societal, right, national, global, at every level, we're all being challenged in ways we would have never imagined, right? And so unprecedented challenges require unprecedented solutions. And Absolutely. My question is, how do we get to and that's what I was sharing earlier, where I'm like praying to my ancestors, tell me how my ancestors never lived through what I'm living through today.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, so what's missing? And I think what's missing is that what I've learned, and this is what neuroscience has shown us, that creativity cannot we can't access creativity when we're afraid. You know, when we're afraid, fear narrows our focus. And the very resource that we all have, that creativity, that imagination, the ability to innovate solutions and be that ingenuity that we all have access to, right? That's what we need to solve these problems, but we can't access that when we're afraid. And so my thing is, right now, a lot of us are afraid, and our focus is so narrowed. Our perspective is so, you know, it's like it's really closed. You know, we're seeing maybe, you know, 2 minutes ahead of us on any given day. We can't see beyond that, right? And so I thought, like, what we need is something that, and this is something that I'm learning too. I'm not coming as the expert and saying I know how to do this, although I have done it all my life. And I think it has contributed greatly to my ability to succeed and thrive despite unprecedented challenges in my own life and my personal life. But it's how do we increase our capacity for change and uncertainty? How do we learn to befriend that, the unknown? You know, the not knowing, the not having the right answer, there not being a immediate solution. You know, how do we get comfortable with the discomfort? How do we get comfortable with that uncertainty? And so Bend Without Breaking is, I think, you know, it came because I thought to myself, and I've been thinking back to that notion of like, what am I here to do? I was asking myself that a lot, and someone, a friend of mine, said, "Well, what's your story?" And so I was like, "Well, I have many stories, so I don't know. What am I going to talk about? Losing 100 pounds? Am I going to talk? What is my actual story?" But when I step back, the theme is the same. The theme, despite every challenge that I've lived through and continue to experience today, the theme is being able to bend without breaking, bending with the storms, the way that trees do, right? And really learning to be with the chaos, right? But to know where my roots are and what does that look like, you know? And I'm learning things like ritual, daily ritual, for example, and it looks different for everyone, whether it's meditation or a walk or whatever it is, that creates continuity for us. That's something that we get to root ourselves in. We get to, so the continuity that we're seeking out there, we're waiting for life to be stable. We're waiting for life to calm down. It never will. That's what I'm learning. Life never, people go, well, man, when things settle down, I'll finally be able to. No, the settling down is here. It's you.
Yeah.
You're creating that continuity. You have to create the stability through your practices, through your processes, through your thoughts, through your mindset. And that's what Bend Without Breaking is really all about.
Oh, so good. I love it. I mean, I hear you speak of it and I think of, you know, resiliency and how it's really about, you know, the outside circumstances, the challenges, the fear, the overwhelm, the events, the unexpected will always happen, right? And how do you build up yourself to bounce back quicker, you know, to be able to bounce back at all, right? To be able to bend without breaking. So I think it's epic. And where can folks tune in so that they can hear more about it?
Anywhere that podcasts are available. So Spotify,
All the spaces, all the platforms.
Yeah.
All right, great. Well, and I'll drop it in the show notes. All right, so amazing. And we're going to move into the final piece before we wrap, which is a speed round. And so I call it the forwarding 4. So I will ask you 4 questions, ask you to answer with the first thing that comes to mind, knowing that there is no right or wrong answer, right? Just go where you feel guided to go. And whenever you are ready, I will start.
Okay, let's go.
All right. Number 1, name one area of your life where you are intentionally healing.
I'm not. I feel integrated. I've done my healing work. I'm not, no, I'm at a point where I feel integrated, and I am now using all the tools I've learned to live.
Great. All right. Number 2, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
If you don't ask, the answer is always no.
Mm,
So you
great.
may as well ask.
Might as well ask, right?
Yes.
Amazing. Number 3, what's your call to action to the collective?
Mind your business.
Mm,
Mind your business. And
yeah.
not like a don't be nosy thing, but like really mind your business.
Yeah. Focus in. All right. And number 4, what promise do you want and need to make to yourself in this moment?
Just keep going, and to trust myself. Because and that's the thing. When I think back on all those unprecedented challenges that I got through, that got me here, it was all me. So this like contrived self-doubt that I was carrying for so many years is bullshit.
Mm,
My first curse
yeah.
word, sorry.
No, you don't have to be sorry.
And
Yeah.
like when I had that realization, and I have it every other day or so, where I'm like, man, I'm not letting people tell me shit anymore. Like I know exactly what I'm doing. And that's my promise to myself, is to remember, I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. And I get to trust myself, and trust my knowing, and just trust myself that I got it. I got this.
Yeah, you do. I love it. I love it. Amazing, Tamara. Thank you. Thanks so much. Tell us, how can folks get in touch with you, learn more about the work that you're doing, share out all your info.
I think the best way to probably stay in touch with me is through Instagram, Dynamic Insights LLC. But I also have a website, Dynamic Insights Group. But I think the most where you'll get the most up to date information is going to be through my Instagram page.
Great. All right, perfect. So I'll drop it in the show notes, and so folks can find you easily. Tamara, thank you for gracing the space. Thank you for being here. So many golden nuggets that, are worth podcast episodes all in, on their own right. So I appreciate you for being here. Thank you for sharing out your wisdom. There's so much of it to share. And everybody else, thank you for tuning in to this episode of the V Spot. To be continued.